Welcome to the World of Mythology channel. I've been working on this video for a long time. Please write any comment supporting the channel. I'll be incredibly grateful. The person who leaves the most like comment will appear in the next video. So go ahead and leave a comment and enjoy the watch. Imagine a late night somewhere in medieval Rus. The village is falling asleep. Embers glow faintly in the stove. An old woman sits by the dim light of a splinter, whispering to the children, "Don't go into the forest at night. She is there. It is there. That which has no name that can be spoken aloud is there." What scared our ancestors the most? Not some abstract devil from foreign books, but their own native horrors, born from the dark soil, from the swamps, from the night forest just beyond the edge of the village. Today we're going to talk about 5 creatures from Slavic mythology so terrifying that peasants were afraid to even utter their names. These aren't fairy tale characters for children. This is ancient fear, encoded deep in our culture for thousands of years. Make yourselves comfortable, and preferably, don't watch this video alone. In 5th place is a creature whose name you most likely already know. But what you think you know about it is almost certainly wrong. The Upyr. Yes, it was from this exact word that the English vampire originated. However, the real Upyr is not an elegant count in a black cloak with the Carpathian Mountains behind him. It is something fundamentally different, and fundamentally much more terrifying. So who is an Upyr really? In East Slavic tradition, an Upyr is a dead man who refuses to die. Or more precisely, one who is not allowed to die. Who became an Upyr? The list is chilling. A person who died an unnatural death. Someone who drowned, was murdered, or committed suicide. A sorcerer or healer who made a pact with unclean forces. Someone who was cursed right before death. An unbaptized child, especially one born from an unholy union. A person over whose body a cat jumped before the burial. Notice something important. There was no bite. You didn't become infected with Upyrism. You became an Upyr, and that was the truly scary part. It meant that any neighbor, any relative, could turn out to be one of these restless dead. What did it look like, and what did it do? In folk beliefs, the Upyr looked exactly like a corpse, pale, bloated with bloodshot eyes. Sometimes its face was red from the blood it had drunk. It rose from the grave at night and came to its own people. First to its wife or husband, then to the children, then to more distant relatives, methodically, without any rush, and everyone around it would begin to waste away and die. Pay attention. The Upyr did not hunt strangers. It destroyed its own family. This made the belief especially horrifying on a psychological level, because if an epidemic broke out in the village and people started dying one after another, it meant that someone recently buried had risen, and that someone was your father, your husband, your brother. How did people fight it? This is where it gets truly terrifying from a historical point of view. When villagers suspected an Upyr had appeared, they would open the grave. If the body had not decomposed properly, if it remained pinkish instead of turning blue, if the inside of the coffin was scratched, if blood was found, this was considered proof. Then came the ritual of destruction. Drive an aspen stake through the body, straight into the heart, or into the back, or through the stomach into the ground, to pin it in place. Cut off the head and place it between the legs or face down. Cover the grave with poppy seeds. The Upyr would have to count every seed before dawn and wouldn't have time to do harm. Burn the body and scatter the ashes at a crossroads. Documented evidence of such exhumations has survived, and they date not to the dark Middle Ages, but to the 18th to 19th centuries. Real people, real graves, real horror. Why is this truly terrifying? The Upyr is scary, not because it is strong or fast. It is scary because it is yours. Because the death of a loved one is not the end. Because the dead can return and take everyone they loved with them. This is an archetypal fear, the fear that the boundary between the living and the dead is permeable, that death is not a conclusion. In 4th place is a creature that lives where light does not reach. The Vodianoy, water spirit. At first glance, it seems familiar. A grandfather with a fishtail sitting in a pond, sometimes playing harmless tricks. That's how cartoons portray him. Forget all of that. The real Vodianoy in authentic folk tradition is not a kind old man. He is a cruel and insatiable master of all bodies of water. Rivers, lakes, swamps, deep pools and ponds. His appearance varied by region. Sometimes he was depicted as a huge man with a green beard made of algae, covered in scales or slime, with webbed hands. Sometimes as a giant fish with a human face. Sometimes as a drowned man carried by the current. And sometimes as a handsome young man, recognizable only by his constantly wet left side of clothing, always dripping. He could take the form of a familiar person, a neighbor, a relative, or even a child, to lure people into the water. What did he want? The Vodianoy demanded sacrifices. Not metaphorically, literally. In folk beliefs, it was thought that every year the Vodianoy must receive a certain number of souls. Those who drowned were his prey, and he actively hunted for them. Especially dangerous times were considered, swimming at noon and midnight, hours when evil forces are strongest. Swimming without a body cross. Swimming on Thursday, a day associated with the pagan thunder god. Swimming in an unfamiliar place without asking the owner's permission. Swimming after sunset. Peasants never swam casually. Before entering the water, one had to ask the Vodianoy for permission. People would throw him a piece of bread or a pinch of tobacco. He loved tobacco. They avoided making noise or splashing too loudly. What did he do with the drowned? This is where it gets the most horrifying. According to folk beliefs, the Vodianoy didn't simply drown people. He collected their souls and kept them in his underwater kingdom, trapped inside clay pots, sealed tightly with lids. The soul of a drowned person could not pass on to the afterlife. It remained in captivity, forever. That's why the drowned were feared more than anyone. They themselves became servants of the Vodianoy, Rusalki, Navyi, restless undead who then dragged others down into the depths. The body of a drowned person washed ashore could not be buried in the village cemetery. It had to be interred outside the graveyard, because the earth would not accept someone who now belonged to the water. Why is this truly terrifying? The Vodianoy embodies the fear of an element that cannot be controlled. For a peasant, the river was both life and death at once. It gave fish, drinking water, and water for the fields. Yet it was also a constant mortal threat. Children drowned frequently, adults drowned. Floods wiped out entire villages. The Vodianoy put a face on this horror. He explained why it happened. And most importantly, he gave people the illusion of control. If you asked properly, if you brought the right offering, perhaps he would spare you. In third place is not a single creature, but an entire world. Nav. In ancient Slavic cosmology, the world was divided into three parts. Yav, the world of the living. Prav, the world of the gods in higher order. And Nav, the world of the dead. Dark, cold, located somewhere beyond the horizon, beyond the river of oblivion, beyond the boundaries of the living world. But Nav is not just the afterlife. It is a realm that sometimes breaks through into the world of the living. Who are the Navyi? The Navyi are the souls of the deceased who could not find peace. Unlike Upyrs, Navyi are not physically risen corpses. They are bodiless spirits, invisible, cold, and hungry. They return to the world of the living on specific days, especially during the so-called Nav days or Nav holidays in spring, before Radunitsa. During these days, the boundary between the worlds grew thin. The Navyi came for food and warmth, things they no longer had. They could send illnesses, especially to children. They could press down on a sleeping person, which gave rise to beliefs about nightmares and the Nochnitsa, night hag, who sits on the chest. They could drive people insane. Special danger, Navyi children. Among all the Navyi, the most dangerous were considered to be the children, unbaptized infants who died, stillborn babies, children who perished by violent death. They had no name, were not accepted into the world of the living, but could not properly enter the world of the dead either. They were stuck in between. They were called by different names: Dityatki, little ones, Kuvatki, Zlidni. They wandered at night, crying, and their cries could lure a mother or any compassionate person into a deadly place. The most terrifying part of the belief is that they were not evil on purpose. They were simply unhappy, and that unhappiness was contagious. Nav days and what peasants did. On Nav days, it was forbidden to work. It was forbidden to wash clothes. Otherwise, the Navy would take the clean water and bring a plague. You couldn't take out the trash or make noise. The dead had to be fed. People would leave food at the threshold or on the graves. Bread, kissel, pancakes, sometimes meat. This was not a metaphor, it was a literal ritual of feeding the spirits. If you didn't feed them, they would come themselves, and they would take what they needed. And what they took, you wouldn't like it. Why is this truly terrifying? Nav is the fear that death is not a departure, that the dead remember, that they miss us, that they are cold and hungry there, in the darkness, and that if we don't take care of them, they will be offended. This is a very human fear, the fear of guilt before the deceased, the fear that we didn't do enough, that they will return, not out of malice, but simply because they have nowhere else to go. In second place is a being so ancient that it has several names, and none of them were ever spoken aloud. Mara, Morana, Morana, Mor. This is the goddess of death. Not a messenger of death, not a guide of souls, not an abstract concept, a true goddess, dark, powerful, and inevitable. Who is Morana? Morana is one of the central figures in the pre-Slavic pantheon, the goddess of winter, death, and night. Sister or direct opposite of Jiva, the goddess of life, a dual being in whom all cold, all darkness, and the end of everything was concentrated. She was described as a tall woman in white robes, or in black, depending on the region, with long white hair, with skin the color of snow or ice, with empty eyes. Sometimes she appeared as an old woman with a scythe, an image that later passed into the general European iconography of death. Sometimes as a beautiful young woman, because death can be beautiful, and that perhaps is the most terrifying version of all. She didn't just kill, she reigned. Morana did not hunt individual people. That was beneath her dignity. She sent more, mass death. The word mor, plague, pestilence, itself comes from her name, as do the verbs to morit, to exterminate, and umerit, to die. She brought epidemics, plague, and famine. She passed through a village unseen, and people dropped dead where they stood. Cattle fell. Birds fell from the sky. Grain turned black in the barns. She could not be stopped. One could only try to appease her or deceive her. The ritual of burning Morana. And here's one of the most fascinating and terrifying facts. Every year at the end of winter, during the festival we now know as Maslenitsa, Morana was burned. People made a huge straw effigy dressed in women's clothing, sometimes with a painted face, and burned it on a bonfire amid shouts and songs of joy. This was not mere cheerful folk festivities. It was a magical ritual of murdering the goddess of death. Only by destroying her image with fire could they drive away winter and the death she brought. Only then could they force her to retreat for one more year. But she always returned, the next winter, again and again. Connection to the nightmare Mara. Interestingly, the word nightmare comes from the same root, through French cauchemar, where mare refers to a nocturnal creature that sits on the chest of a sleeping person. Mara Morana also appeared in this form, as a night visitor who came to the sleeping, pressed on their chest, and sent terrifying visions. She showed a person their own death. Waking up from a nightmare, our ancestor would think, Mara has come, which meant something bad was near. Why is this truly terrifying? Morana is the fear of inevitability. Not a monster that can be defeated, not a villain with a weak spot. Death cannot be defeated. Winter cannot be defeated forever. A plague cannot be stopped by any force. All you could do is burn the effigy and hope. One more year, please, just one more year. In first place is a being about which we have the least reliable information. And that is precisely why it is the most terrifying. Chernobog. What do we know? The 12th century chronicler Helmold of Bosau recorded something striking about the Baltic Slavs. During their feasts, there was a ritual. A cup was passed around the circle, and toasts were made. First in honor of the good god, and then to the shame of the evil one. The evil god was called Chernobog, the black god. This is practically the only direct mention. Everything else is reconstruction, speculation, and scholarly debate. But the fact itself is astonishing. The Slavs had a god of evil. Not just an evil spirit or a demon, a god. Equal in status to the god of good, perhaps his brother, perhaps his primordial opposite. The duality. Belobog and Chernobog. Many researchers believe that in pre-Slavic cosmology, there existed a great duality. Two principles, two gods, two opposing forces. Belobog, light, day, harvest, luck, life. Chernobog, darkness, night, plague, curse, death. Not good versus evil in the Christian sense, but two equal necessary principles, like winter and summer, like death and birth. Chernobog was not simply bad, he was necessary. The dark half of existence, the part without which the light half could not exist. This made him not just scary, it made him inescapable. What did he do? If we accept the reconstruction of this dualistic mythology, Chernobog was responsible for everything that went wrong. War, his work. Illness, his touch. Crop failure, his gaze upon the fields. Loss of livestock, his breath. Madness, his gift. Curse, his word. He did not hunt individual people. He ruled over the forces of darkness themselves. Connection to Veles. Some scholars link Chernobog with Veles, the god of the underworld, cattle, wealth, and magic. Veles is a complex figure. He was not unambiguously evil. He was chthonic, connected with the earth, death, and secret knowledge. The opponent of the thunder god Perun. The conflict between Perun and Veles is one of the central myths of pre-Slavic tradition. Perun chases Veles across the sky, hurling lightning bolts, while Veles hides, behind trees, behind rocks, behind people. If Chernobog and Veles are the same entity or closely related, then we are looking at an image of incredible power and complexity. A god who rules the dead, controls chaos, opposes the higher order, and hides in the roots of the world tree. Why was his name never spoken aloud? In magical tradition, naming is summoning. To pronounce a being's name is to draw its attention. Chernobog was never called by name. People said, the one in the darkness, the unclean one, the cunning one. He. In the Christian era, he was identified with the devil, but that was a later overlay. Originally, this was a primordial fear of chaos, of what existed before order, of the darkness from which everything came and to which everything will one day return. Why is this the scariest of all? Because Chernobog is not a monster with specific habits, not a creature you can hide from with amulets or appease with the right sacrifice. He is a principle, the dark half of reality. Everything that goes wrong is him. Everything that causes unexplained pain is him. A child's incurable illness, a war that cannot be stopped, a death that comes too soon. Our ancestors looked into the darkness beyond the campfire and knew that something was there, something enormous, something that had a name, but one that was better left unspoken.